Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find us on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Um, this is a continuation of the introduction of 440C into the shop. Um, in this video we're going to go over the heat treat that I did on these 440C blades, some of the testing. We'll do this the non-destructive type testing, well, mostly. And then after this video, then if I didn't forget anything, then we'll go ahead and start doing some serious destructive testing, like cutting nails in half, bending blades in a vise, breaking them, that sort of thing. So anyhow, in the first video I told you how come I came to choose 440C. The next thing was to go ahead and get some of the 440C to test it right quick, which I did that, and we'll go over some of the results of that. Now this right here is the most important tool in my shop. I would much rather that you took away my grinder or my anvil or my power hammer than take away this notebook from me. This notebook has got every test that I've done for the last year or two, I believe. I can't remember when I started this one. Got some other ones over on the shelf somewhere or other. This one goes back to 13, so yep, about the last 2 years or so. But anyway, so the first piece of 440C that I had, this one right here, that's what this page is on. So we've got, I made 3 test blades, used the Carter pattern necker pattern to do these tests just because I like it. It's a fun knife to make, and it works really good without a like a additional handle. You just wrap it up in electrical tape and roll with it. The most common heat treat that I found on the internet was basically to bring your kiln up to I think 1875 to about 1950. Place the blades in there, keep the blades in for 20 minutes or so, and then oil or air quench the blades. I went ahead and used oil because when I ran this test, I had just finished heat treating a whole bunch of 1095 blades. I heat treat those in canola oil, and it had cooled down to 125 degrees. I'm mostly an edge quench kind of guy, so this first series of tests I did edge quenches on them. Then I got to chatting with some folks, and they were telling me that with stainless steel it needs to be fully hardened to retain the stainless qualities of the steel. So we'll find out about that when I break these edge quench blades. After I test them and learn everything I can about how they perform, then I'll go ahead and take the pieces and put them in a pan of water and see if that holds true or not. But anyway, so these blades, I put them in the kiln at 1900 degrees for 30 minutes. I edge quenched 2 of them in 125 degree canola oil, and then the third one I just clamped it tip up in the vise and let it air cool. The shop temperature was 67 degrees that day. I think I got that first piece of steel from Aldo over at New Jersey Steel Supply. Quick web search would find him, and it was labeled 440C 103 thousandths to 113 thousandths, and it was a 1x36 inch piece. All 3 of them tested hard with the file after a couple of strokes. Now here's another thing. I did not wrap these in foil. First of all, I don't have any foil, and second of all, I do every kitchen knives and EDCs. I do all my grinding after heat treat on a water-cooled belt grinder. So I didn't think, first of all, I wanted to see what the big scaling issue was that everybody talks about, why you have to use foil. Basically, this is it. Let's see, I'll put the camera down and see if I can't show that a little bit better. The scaling was really minimal. I was envisioning you know, large sheets of steel coming off the sides. And it didn't do that at all. Basically, it's, you know, it discolored it. And that was, this particular one was in the 1900 degree kiln for 20 minutes and then quenched in 145 degree canola oil. So anyway, yeah, so the first couple of strokes with the file will take off any steel that's been had the carbon burned out of it from being exposed to the hot environment in the kiln. So your first couple of strokes, they would bite a little bit, and then as soon as that steel got scraped off, then the file wouldn't bite anymore. I guess you can, a file test. This is a Nicholson Mill Bastard Black Diamond file made in Mexico. This was fully hardened, so we'll just check the spine. Hear that sound? It'll kind of bite and kind of slip. Of course, this one's been tempered, and we'll get to that in a second. So then, once I got the blades hard, let's get you back up here where you can see. The air quenched one might have been slightly softer. The spines on the edge quenched ones, it says may have been slightly softer, but I don't think I would have sworn to that. So then I tempered them, and I've got two toasters that I use. This one's the Shelby toaster. That's because that's where I got it. Shelby's my daughter. So I stuck them in there at 200 degrees for 2 hours and did it twice, and then tested it on the brass rod, and I got a chip. It chipped really bad. So I upped the temperature 25 degrees for another 2 hours, tested it on the edge flex test, it chipped, came all the way up to 300 degrees for 2 hours, and they passed. No chipping. Once I got a usable edge at that point, then I went ahead and did some cut testing. And you can see the cut testing here. I'll just, because you guys can pause it and rewind it and look at this again. But basically, the one with the black tape was an edge quench. The first cut took 9 pounds of force to make the cut. The 100th cut took 14 pounds of force to make that cut. The 200th cut took 16 pounds, and so on until I quit. Now would be a good time to go over. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do look at this one. So then, from the results from that, then I got the new steel in from Admiral and went through it again. This time, based on what I learned the first time, I set the kiln at 1900 degrees because that seemed to work. That was the setting. It actually read 1898 to 1906. Put the canola oil up at my normal 135 to 145 degree temperature. I did 6 knives. Well, I did 7. One of them's a paring knife that's going to go in my kitchen for long-term testing. But I did the first one at 15 minutes before I quenched it in the canola oil. Or the first two. 2 of them at 20 minutes before I quenched them in the canola oil. And then I do a multiple quench on 1095, 5160, and 52100. So I did 2 of them at 15 minutes and then quenched them twice. So heated it up for 15 minutes, quenched it, let it air cool down to room temp, and then repeated that for the second time. Based on the testing prior, I did 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. Let it cool to room temperature, and then did it again. All 6 of them sharpened up easily. We'll talk about that in a second also. Edge flexed them all. The 15 minutes single quench, I heard some very slight chipping in the edge when I did it, but I didn't see the chipping. Bore down pretty hard at about a 40-degree angle and no edge damage, and then did cutting tests. Sharpened them on a DMT 325. This was with 3/8 inch manila rope. The first one was 3/8. The second I decided to do a full piece of 3/4 inch rope instead of just one layout of it. The third test was back to the 3/8 because the 3/4 was a little bit too tough on my hands. And then I did a run each with the Microtech that's in 154 cm and my Benchmade 940 and S30V that's been reground. So these blades, that first number is the amount of force to complete the first cut, the second number is the 100th cut, and the third number is the 200th cut. So you can see they cut pretty well. This one right here, not really sure what happened there, if I didn't get the edge sharp enough to begin with, or if I left a little bit of a burr on it, or maybe I just hit a really hard section of rope. You never can tell. But basically, according to these three runs, the 20-minute and the 15-minute ones did better than the double quenched ones. So right now, based on this performance, along with the fact that I heard some slight chipping on this 15-minute single quenched one, the 20-minute single quenched one seems to be doing the best. Anyway, so now we'll go over the first ease of sharpening. You know, when I make a knife, there's several things that I'm really looking for. I want them to cut good, I want them to be easy to sharpen, and I want them to resist damage and hold an edge for a good long time. So while my favorite stone for almost all applications is a 325 grit diamond hone. They stay flat. 325 grit gives a good balance of toothy edge, so high cutting aggression, but a good long lasting edge. That's what I like to sharpen with most of the times. But to check for ease of sharpening, I want a knife that's easy to sharpen on a plain Jane Norton crystalline stone. This one I think is a 3 or a 400 and like a 120 grit, something like that. Lubricate these with regular old mineral oil. And if I can sharpen a knife pretty easy on a regular old oil stone, then that passes my requirement for ease of sharpening. So after all of them pass the ease of sharpening requirement, I actually back up first. First of all, we're going to show this a little bit. No, we'll do it with separate knives. Okay, so the brass rod test. This is my brass rod setup. All it is a 1/4 inch brass rod epoxied into a groove on the top of a block of wood. You can either clamp this in the vise and do your edge flexes, or you can set it on a bathroom scale, and that will allow you to record the amount of force that you use, that the knife will require to flex the edge. Now, I was talking to another friend on the internet the other day, and we were talking about the brass rod test. Now, the brass rod test, usually call it either the brass rod test or an edge flex test. But there's a third name for it that we came up with, and that was the edge deformation test. Because basically, when you're testing a knife for the edge flex, it's really easy to get a blade that'll pass the edge flex, where, you know, the edge flexes up over the brass rod, and then it either chips or returns to true, or it stays bent over. If the edge chips, it's too hard. If it stays bent over, it's too soft. If it flexes up and then returns to true, then you're in a pretty close range of where you want that edge to be for your edge stability. Now, if you take that farther, testing for the edge flex just at a predetermined angle, that tells you that you're kind of close. If you want to take that test farther and learn more about your steel, Then you keep increasing the angle and increasing the pressure until that edge deforms. Once that edge deforms, you can see it either just by naked eye or you can look at it under magnification. Then you can really start fine-tuning your heat treat to get what I think is perfect, where the edge will crack. The edge will flex up over that brass rod, and every steel has got an elastic limit. Once you reach that elastic limit and go past it, something will happen to that steel. The best that I have seen is where the edge will not chip, it won't roll, but once you reach that elastic limit, the edge will crack, and that crack will run to the shoulder of the edge and stop. That means that you have got that steel as hard as it can be and no harder, and it's not too soft. Just perfect. So anyway, let's see if I can zoom you in enough to see. No, we'll do this on the vise so maybe you can see the edge actually flexing. See that edge flexing right over that rod and then coming back to true? Maybe that light's too much. There it is. Just that ribbon of steel that's coming up over. I think we've still got a bit too much light here. There it is. So that one's flexing and it's returning to true. So now let's do some destructive testing on this one. Let's make sure that I have the right knife first though. We're going to do it on the bathroom scale so that we can read the amount of force. And since the 20-minute single quenched and the 15-minute single quenched did the best in the cutting tests, those are the two that I'm going to go for. So we're going to take the 20-minute. Okay, we can flex the edge, and it's taken 15 pounds to be able to flex it. So now is where we break out the safety glasses, because if it chips, that chip will go flying off. Yeah, we're still at 15 to 20 pounds to complete an edge flex. It will pass it on both sides. And I'm not hearing any chipping. I'm not seeing any chipping. It's doing really good. So now let's go ahead and force that edge to get damaged and see what it takes. So about at that angle, nothing. And then we'll keep increasing the angle. There, it's flexing pretty good. It's flexing really hard. We're at about 30 pounds. Let's stop right there and take a look. Still nothing. Let's go this way. See if you can see the angle that I'm holding it at there. We're at 30 pounds. $40. So we'll have to go back and look and see what that scale read when it happened, but we were at roughly 35 to 40 degree angle under 40 pounds of force. and we have a slight chip that just went to the shoulder of the edge. So we could probably bring the hardness down just slightly. This is on that 20-minute single quench blade. But the rest of the edge looks nice and straight because this was flexed. Here's the chip, and it was flexing from back here, a good 1/16 of an inch past the edges of the chip. And we've got 4.5 minutes, so we'll do the 15-minute one. 15-minute single quench. We're at 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, and there it chipped. So it chipped at 35-degree angle at 40 foot-pounds of force. And the chip did not chip all the way out. See how it's still hanging on there? There we go. It was just hanging on by a little bit there, so it did chip cleanly out. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the last video here in a second with I'll show you how I cut the rope. I'm not going to make you sit and watch me cut rope for hours on end to do a complete test, but just show you how I cut the rope like that, and then we'll go ahead and clamp these 3 up in a vise and bend them over, break them, and see what happens.